Welcome back to the Foundry by Forged College. Look, huge congratulations are in order right off the bat. You literally just survived the deep data mines of measuring decentralization trade-offs. And hey, you made it back to the surface in one piece. That is no small feat. So today, we're stepping off the battlefield and into the workshop for our explainer on drafting the comparative analysis. This is the exact moment where all those headache-inducing Byzantine fault tolerance theories and those massive, frankly intimidating CSV files you've been wrangling finally come together. We are going to build a highly structured, absolutely rock-solid draft comparing consensus mechanisms. Honestly, I want you to think of this less like writing some daunting creative essay and a lot more like assembling a precision machine on a factory floor. So let's look at the blueprint for today's assembly process. First, we'll gather our evidence stack, then we'll run it through the drafting assembly line. From there, we'll forge our solid recommendations, run a final quality inspection, and wrap the whole draft up. Okay, so what is our ultimate goal here? By the end of this process, you are going to produce a single cohesive document section, ideally sitting right around that 900 to 1200 word mark. We're taking raw, unfiltered data and transforming it into narrative evidence. And to be clear, this is absolutely not about padding out a word count with flowery language, right? We are treating the writing process as a purely mechanical assembly. Every single sentence you write has a specific structural job to do. Let's dive right into phase one, gathering evidence, the raw materials. Before you even type a single word, you need three specific components right there on your factory floor. First, your evaluation rubric. This gives us our priorities, right? Things like security thresholds and speed requirements. Second, your BFT analysis. These are the theoretical constraints, basically the rules of the game and exactly how the network might break. And third, your empirical measurements, the hard, undeniable numbers from those CSV data files and charts you've been putting together. Listen, if you try to build this draft without these three pieces seamlessly working together, you're not doing a comparative analysis. You're just building castles in the sky based on pure vibes. And we don't do vibes here. We need hard evidence. Now, how do we actually fuse these elements together? We use what's called an evidence map. This is a crucial first step. Think of it like a routing table in networking. For every single claim you plan to make in your draft, you map it directly back to its theoretical rule and its corresponding hard data anchor. You are actively ensuring that every single claim you make is fastened to reality, so it doesn't just float away under scrutiny. Moving on to phase two, the assembly line. Let's talk step-by-step construction. Your draft needs to follow a totally predictable, absolutely repeatable structure for every single consensus mechanism you analyze. You'll want to lay out a brief description, the key constraints, the measured behavior, your evidence-backed claims, and the practical implications. Now, you might be wondering, why be so rigid about this? Well, keeping your per mechanism subsections strictly parallel massively reduces the cognitive load for your reader. They can scan the document and instantly compare, say, proof of stake to proof of work, simply because the information is sitting in the exact same place every time. And this right here perfectly illustrates the difference between a weak, messy draft and a capstone-ready draft. On the left, a weak claim is basically just a floating cloud. It's flimsy, unanchored opinion, something completely hollow, like mechanism X is really fast. But on the right, a solid, rigorous claim is a paired statement. It securely bolts the BFT theory directly to a measured data anchor, like a highly specific latency measurement pulled straight from your CSV files. Let me be real with you, if your claim is missing either half of that pairing, it's just going to float away. All right, on to phase three, forging solid recommendations and weighing those trade-offs. Here's where the rubber really meets the road. This step forces us to reconcile all that abstract BFT theory with the actual, measured reality of the network. You're going to write trade-off paragraphs that focus on specific axes from your rubric. For example, measuring throughput focus against decentralization focus. You'll state a clear thesis, provide one theoretical summary, one empirical summary, and then you make a definitive recommendation about which mechanism actually fits that specific need best. And the culmination of all those trade-off summaries, those are your final recommendations. You're going to need at least 2 of these in the draft, and they should sound incredibly concrete and actionable. Leave absolutely zero room for ambiguity. Like this. Prefer mechanism A for high-throughput permission deployments. Prefer mechanism B where no decentralization is a strict requirement. See that? That is exactly the kind of solid, definitive output your final capstone report demands. You aren't just copy-pasting data. You are advising on a real, high-stakes architectural decision. Now, here is a massive hallmark of a true professional. You have got to explicitly surface your uncertainty. For each recommendation you make, tag the quality of your evidence. Are you high, medium, or low on confidence here? What specific data is missing that could potentially completely change your mind? Acknowledging these gaps doesn't weaken your blueprint, it actually proves your rigor. And as a quick aside, if you do want to dig deeper and figure out how to fill those knowledge gaps later, exploring Forge College's wider learning programs is just a fantastic way to really master those intricate network behaviors. Okay, phase 4, the final quality inspection. Let's talk about the threshold. Think of this as the final QA test before your draft is allowed to leave the factory floor. We use a 20-point rubric for this specific milestone. To pass, your draft absolutely must score at least a 14 out of 20. But honestly, I know you can do way better than that. I am highly encouraging you to enthusiastically aim for that capstone-ready 18+ mark. Let's break down exactly how those points are awarded. Your inspection checklist covers 4 key dimensions. First, per mechanism completeness. Is the structure totally identical across the board? Second, evidence traceability. This is the big one, guys. Every single claim must trace perfectly back to that evidence map without snapping a link. Third, recommendation validity. Do you have at least 2 genuinely actionable, logically justified recommendations? And finally, readability and audience fit. Seriously, try reading your executive summary out loud. It should make perfect intuitive sense to a technically literate reader without completely drowning them in a sea of unexplained jargon. Which brings us to the final step, phase 5, wrapping up the draft so it's ready for export. You've got to remember, a comparative analysis is quite literally only as good as its reproducibility. You must embed your key figures and properly caption them with the exact source CSV file names, attach that evidence map as an appendix so anyone can audit your logic from the ground up, and critically, include a short, clear README file that lists the exact commands needed to regenerate your figures. Total, 100% transparency is the goal here. And before you hit save for that final time, I want you to critically ask yourself, what are your data gaps? Go ahead and add a short open question section listing exactly what additional measurements would either dramatically strengthen or completely overturn your recommendations. Again, surfacing your uncertainty like this doesn't hurt you. It gives the final capstone build a crystal clear set of follow-up tasks, which is incredibly valuable. And there we go. That brings us to the end of the assembly line. You now have a rigorously structured, heavily evidence-rich comparative draft ready to go. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a slightly provocative final thought to really stress test your work. Ask yourself this. If your chosen network suddenly scaled its user base by 10x tomorrow, which of your evidence-backed claims would be the very first to fracture under the pressure? Really think about that one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in the workshop today. To master more Web3 topics and continue sharpening your architectural skills, definitely make sure to visit us at forge.college. Happy drafting, and I'll see you in the next explainer.